So, welcome back to the channel update video that I have been constantly promising for the past 2 or 3 weeks at the end of all of my videos, but I have been putting it off for one reason or another, and I was kind of debating not doing one at all considering the circumstances, but I feel as though it's only really in the short term that things are in a little bit of flux. I think longer term there are still the same topics that I can talk about anyway, but we will talk about the short term first of all, of course, and this is really just sort of documenting the progress of the channel as I expect it to happen over the course of the coming weeks and months. And the short term is actually mostly good news, I think, in the sense that the channel could actually benefit from some of the upheaval that's happening at the moment. Of course, the primary thing to note is, of course, the imminent release of the early access version of Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord, which I do intend to sort of get in on. I don't think, again, like, even with the schedule being all over the place as it is, I don't think that I'm going to be able to have time to dedicate to streaming. I mean, for a start, I don't really even know how to stream because I've never even tried it. The option is there on YouTube, but obviously I haven't gone through the rigmarole of setting it up yet. And considering the scheduling thing, I probably won't have time to do that. It's possible that I could set something like that up, especially seeing as I may actually have more time on my hands than I maybe thought I would have a couple of weeks ago. But we'll get on to that in just a moment. But yeah, Mount & Blade, definitely going to be something that I want to get in on, because it's pretty much the perfect opportunity, I think, to diversify, which I think has been something that I've been lacking on the channel as of late, pretty much entirely, to be honest with you. I mean, let's be honest, the only thing that I've really done with my channel up until this point is sit in my very comfortable position of doing Reforged videos, or Third Age videos in general, I suppose you could say, with some of the other submods that have happened. And I do think I need to sort of break away from that, because of course, as I have said on a different note, part of the reason why I don't really play Third Age Reforged myself anymore is because I really don't want to, because I spend so much time, so much of my free time, making the videos to keep the channel going, that by the time I'm done with that, the last thing I want to be doing with what's left of my free time is even more Third Age. And that is a bit of a shame, but it is also how it is at the moment. Unless I can diversify and sort of spread my attention out over many other things, that is how it's going to stay. And I don't want that to happen, really. I mean, I do feel as though if I am going to be doing Third Age content, that I really should be playing it a little bit more, getting a little bit more involved than I currently am. But again, my willpower is just not there to do that as it stands. I can, of course, continue to make content, and I'm perfectly happy to carry on as things are. But of course, investing even more time into Third Age is when I might start to get a little bit resentful, and that's the last thing that I really want. Because I do still enjoy it as it stands. It's just sort of, it's at the very limit of how much Third Age I can sort of enjoy and continue to enjoy. And you do have to be sustainable with these things. You can't just dump everything you have into one thing, because it will burn out very quickly. And the fact that I've been able to avoid burnout at all is actually fairly substantial. Like, I'm surprised I've been able to do that, to be honest with you. But here I stand still. And so Bannerlord represents a pretty good opportunity to do that, to be honest with you, because the next... I mean, the best thing to do that within the Total War series, like, I don't really feel as though... I did sort of dabble in Three Kingdoms a little bit when it came out, but the kind of game that Three Kingdoms was, like, it had a good campaign, and still does, like Three Kingdoms. Certainly the campaign aspects of it are very, very good, but the multiplayer was kind of poor for Three Kingdoms when it first came out. It was very, very easy to abuse the systems that were put in place. And obviously, as a primarily multiplayer-focused content channel, it wasn't really ideal. Like, I did try bits and pieces, and they may very well have improved it since then, but obviously it's a little bit late to go back for that now. And Warhammer 3 is kind of on the horizon. I mean, not really a lot of news has happened about that. I think they were hoping that they could do that Troy Total War game first, but it doesn't seem to have gone down too well. Warhammer 3 may be an opportunity to diversify within the Total War space as well, but again, that's something for the future, and that may actually coincide with some of the news that I've got on a longer time scale, but again, we'll get to that later on in the video. But yeah, Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord is the long and short of it. That will be what will be coming in the near future, to some extent or another. Again, I may have more time on my hands than I initially thought, in which case I may look into doing a little bit of streaming as well. But again, that is highly dependent on what actually happens. Speaking of which, the recent upheaval that I am, of course, talking about is the rise of COVID-19, which is a very interesting thing, because from the point of view of the channel, if things do, if like the university does temporarily shut down, of course, that leaves me sat here twiddling my thumbs, wondering what to do. I'm sure that I will have university work to be getting on with as well, but it probably won't be in the same quantities if they do shut it down as if I were in there. Now, for anyone who's paying attention, of course, the UK seems to be taking a much more passive approach than most other people. We're sort of, it seems as though what we're going to try and do is just try and ignore it and hope it goes away. I don't think that's going to work, so I feel as though maybe we can limp our way to the Easter break and then sort of carry on as it stands there. But I would still need to go in over the Easter break, because for my particular degree I need access to specialist software, so even if that happens, I may still be affected, even if the shutdown happens during the Easter break. But again, that's neither here nor there. Really, it's just, I think it's more of a case of when rather than if, just based on all the news which is floating around and based on how the rest of Europe is doing. I think there's a certain air of inevitability about this, that they can't ignore it forever. Which of course means that I may very well have a little bit more time on my hands to dedicate to the channel, in which case I may be able to look into doing things like streaming, finally sort of stop being lazy in that regard and actually learn how to do it, set it all up and get it going. It would be interesting to see if my internet could actually maintain that well. I think we'd probably be fine. I think it does meet the requirements, but even so, you never can tell. I would stream, I think, on YouTube rather than Twitch, just because it's where all of my stuff is anyway. I'm fairly aware that Twitch is probably the better place for streaming as it stands. But again, like, I don't have any presence on Twitch, so it doesn't really make sense to try and build up from nothing again. YouTube is where, you know, everyone knows where I am, so it would probably be easier to just do it on there. Of course, this is more of a case of if, again, like maybe I'll have time to do this sort of streaming. I feel as though Bannerlord single player is again kind of like a Total War campaign, in the sense that it does sort of suit a stream more so than it suits a series, because a series of Bannerlord campaign, much like a Total War campaign, would be extremely long, and long form content doesn't really do too well on YouTube these days, which is one of the reasons why I've shied away from doing single player Total War content as much as I was able. I did dip into it once and it actually did okay, but once again I kind of ran out of time to do that, which is another issue with it. But Bannerlord does have some rather interesting looking multiplayer mechanics as well, which hopefully we can get into and start exploring once the game, or once the early access version of the game at least, is released to the general public. But again, that's going back to Bannerlord. COVID-19, the good old Corona, it could be a good thing for the channel, but of course it is also a bit of pain, because you know, it just sort of disrupts daily life. So let's hope that even though there may be a silver lining to it, at least with regards to my channel, let's hope that passes sooner rather than later. And that brings us on to the longer term future of the channel, which is a little murky, but I do feel as though I kind of need to go into this now rather than just leaving it till late summer when it will be sort of upon me. And that is the fact that, well, provided they don't shunt back the whole semester and I have to sort of go in the autumn and winter as well to finish off my last semester in dissertation, in which case I probably wouldn't graduate until January rather than September. But again, that's if. As it stands, I would still expect to graduate in September, and that of course means that I will be done with university in all likelihood, unless I decide to go on to do a PhD program, which I think is less likely, to be honest with you. I mean, it is a possibility, but it isn't fully likely, and of course even if I do that, there is still the very real possibility that there'll be a lot of movement on my part. And basically what this means is I would very much expect that late September, early October, when I'm officially done with university, that would be the time where my channel scales back rather dramatically in terms, well, I say dramatically, it will definitely scale back in terms of the amount of content I'm able to do, because of course the benefit to university is the fact that I can do my work on my own time. I have a certain set timetable, of course, but most of the work that I do is obviously on my own time, which means I can fit it around, so I can fit my channel around my work. That will be less likely to be the case once I'm done with things, because whether it be a PhD program, whether it be some sort of, you know, obviously full-time employment, which would be the ideal situation for me, that would drastically impact the amount of time that I'm going to be able to put into the channel. So less good news, I suppose, on the part of the channel, that in the sense that, you know, there is a certain air of inevitability around the fact that I will have to cut back rather substantially. But I'm not alone in that. I know that Windy has obviously sort of spoken on his own channel update about this sort of thing, rather recently as well. The fact that he's going to be, rather ironically, going out to sea in much the same way that I may be going out to when I gain full-time employment for weeks at a time. Of course, I will still be able to put out regular content, but much in the same way that he will. I feel as though the videos will have to be scaled back to, at the very most, 2 videos a week, maybe even just the 1 video a week. We shall see. Again, this is sort of the thing which is still very much in flux, because I don't actually know what's going to happen that far out, but it is worth keeping in mind, and it is worth saying now rather than later when I just sort of spring it on everyone. Oh, by the way, there's going to be a dramatic cutback in the amount of content that I make, but it is worth saying here and now that is what's going to say. Of course, there is the very unlikely event that I could suddenly my channel explodes in popularity and all of a sudden, you know, I earn more doing this than I ever would in full-time employment, but I find that somewhat unlikely, to be honest with you. I feel as though my channel has kind of found its level, to be brutal. I feel as though this sort of spot between 4,000 and maybe at the most 6,000 subscribers is all I'm likely to get doing this, which is fine as it stands as sort of a replacement for working in Primark while I'm doing my university degree, which would be horrifying. But obviously for a long-term thing, it won't sustain. So that is worth bearing in mind. The channel will not go away. It is worth saying. Like, it will continue. It will just be maybe half the amount of content that's putting out now, but of course this is still half a year away, maybe even more depending on what happens with the university semesters in the face of COVID-19. But yeah, it's just something we have to wait and see. So that's pretty much to summarise this video. Bannerlord, excellent. COVID-19, not so good, but maybe with a silver lining. And of course, long term, having to scale back the channel is almost a certainty, which obviously is not as good, not great news, I suppose, considering this is about the channel. But yeah, it is something that sort of I will have to start thinking about, I think, over the course of the coming months. And again, it's not the end of the world. Like, I feel as though 2 videos a week is still fine for this channel to remain relevant. It might even be good for the health of the channel in many ways, because it means that I'm not saturating content quite so much, because treating it as a part-time job that I do at the moment means that I do have to meet a certain quota of content just to make sure that it's worth my time doing it. Whereas if I'm doing this alongside a job, obviously the money that I get from this becomes almost irrelevant, really, to be honest with you. It's just a nice little bonus, maybe, that pays for some treats for me, but even then, like, it's not much that I get from this anyway, so yeah, that is something to consider, I suppose. Maybe it'll be a good thing in the long run. Who can tell? But again, this is the sort of thing which will become more relevant as we go along, and of course, with how things are going at the moment, I can't really place any certainty on any of this anyway. So yeah, I hope this was somewhat informative, at least with regards to the ideas that I have for the short term and the long term. And of course, normal service will be resumed following this, and we will get right back into what will probably be a Reforged replay. I am recording this at the weekend, and of course Bannerlord's release is somewhat imminent at this time of recording. But I think there'll be at least 1 Reforged battle before the release of Bannerlord after this video, maybe even 2. And of course Reforged will continue alongside Bannerlord anyway. So yeah, hope you found this somewhat informative, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.